Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us again on Future of Fortunes podcast. This is Jake Claver with my partner in crime, Byron Wolf. How are you, Byron?
Doing great, man. Living the dream. Loving this morning. Got my coffee. Got my caffeine running in the veins. Ready to get into some real estate.
Yeah, brother. So we were just talking a little bit before we hopped on here about digital assets and their role in real estate. I know you're very familiar with building wealth in real estate. So would you want to, give us a synopsis and kind of a brief overview of what that looks like in today's market, and then we can get into how digitizing real estate might change that in the future?
Yeah, for sure. So if you've listened to me at all ever, Jake and I, we do talk about real estate a lot. It is definitely my personal opinion that the path to true generational wealth has to have some real estate in it, right? And so Jake and I were talking right before this. We were kind of just throwing through a bunch of different investments, and like Jake mentioned, the S&P doesn't even have the companies that were originally on it, right? So people say, oh, well, we've got these companies that have been around forever, like Ford, back when you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. I mean, they're still rolling and doing well, right? So yes, there are some assets, or investments in businesses that are going to pay out for a number of years. The reality is, like, real estate is always going to be there, right? Like, those companies can go bankrupt, they can go out, but I mean, you take a piece of property with a house on it, you can burn the house down and the property still worth something, right?
Right.
And so, it's one of the few things that's going to hold value. Again, cyclical, but it's going to hold value forever, right? They're not making any more land. We're not going to figure out a way to create a new,
The metaverse.
it's just not going to happen, right?
Well,
So
so let me give my principles for investing. So
yeah,
when I look at something that I believe is a good investment, it has three things, and those three things are always: it cash flows in some way, it appreciates in value over time, and I can take leverage against it. And there's a few things that do that. Real estate, always, you can always do that with real estate. Companies, to your point that you made before,
yeah,
sometimes you can do that with, we talk about IRAs and investing in those things and taking collateral loans against them. And maybe you're invested in some stocks that pay dividends on a quarterly basis or monthly basis. Those are great. But the bread and butter for those types of investments that have that caveat, the three pieces that I just talked about, real estate is always going to cover those three.
yes. Yeah, it really is. No matter what you're in, like, and so people say, well, what about land? Yep, qualifies. What about, residential, like single family home, qualifies. Multifamily qualifies,
Commercial.
massive multiplex. Yeah, commercial. Like, all of these things are there, right? And so they're always going to do that. They're always going to go up. There's going to be down periods. There's going to be situations where they lose some of that value, and a lot of times that comes after, like, a heavy inflation period
Mm-hmm.
of those values. When and we've seen that recently. I mean, I know people that bought homes, 5 years ago, and they're doubled or more in value. Like, it's insane. And I'm definitely not saying that they're getting to crash. We're not going to.
I
Honestly, I
don't I
feel like
don't
we're going
see
to hold some
that.
value.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't I and again, we'll just give our disclaimer. Anything said here is not financial advice. Everything on this podcast is always for information and educational purposes only. Always consult with your financial advisor or your realtor or anybody else that you feel
some professional.
some professional that deals with real estate before making any decisions in this market. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think that we're going to see the crazy significant devaluation like we did in '08. The reasons for this collapse that was probably going to happen, um, well, I say that I've said before that I don't think it's going to happen, but if we do see a drop in the stock market, I don't think it's going to have the same impact that it had last time on real estate. And you just mentioned before we hopped on here, all of the institutions that are now involved in single family homes and other pieces of real estate that weren't in that market in '08.
No, it's something crazy, and don't quote me on the stats, but it's like one in four are now institutionally owned, and I think I read another stat or was told a stat like by 2050, it's going to be like 1 in 10 are going to be still personally owned. So 9 in 10 will be
Crazy.
yeah, it's insane. And so those, when that happens, those rents are just going to continue to go up, right? If everybody's renting, it's just basic supply and demand,
Right.
and when somebody controls the supply, you can control the demand. I mean, that's just the
Mhm.
reality of the situation, right? Like, so when that occurs and they want those to go up, they're going to go up, because it's a good investment. So if you can't beat them, join them. So like let's
Right.
let's get into how you can own some property. So everybody on here is either they're living with somebody that owns a piece of property or is renting a piece of property, or they own a home or they're renting a home, right? Like and so before people argue, like, what about the people that are transient living in RVs? Well, for a lot of states and a lot of rules, those are properties. I
Well,
think to bring it to
and
you.
and I just want to say these RV parks that are I live here in Texas, and I have seen them pop up everywhere. That seems to be a fad right now, and people are cashing in, buying raw land and converting them into RV parks. So
Yeah.
there's money to be made there too.
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. You got to live somewhere is kind of my gist, right? And so, looking at these and what's going on, I know a lot of people, they like the ability to rent, and they say, oh well, I don't want to be stuck somewhere doing whatever. Well, like owning a piece of property or owning a piece of property doesn't mean that you have to live there, right? Like you can own things as an event. I know people. I have a great friend owns a ton of properties, and he's renting a house down in Honduras right now, right? Because it just makes sense for him to do that, So and that's where he wants to be. So he's renting, but he owns multiple commercial properties, multiple residential properties. And the argument would be like, why doesn't he live in something he owns? Well, he
Why
wants to be
does
in
he need
Honduras.
to?
So,
Yeah. Well, so
yeah, it just makes
Grant
sense.
Grant Cardone makes the same point. He's like,
Yeah,
when you go to the hospital, what do? You rent a bed. When you go to Disneyland, what do? You rent a room. You don't buy the hospital. You don't buy the
yeah,
entire hotel. You rent. And
yeah,
if you own other assets that are cash flowing and those assets pay for your rent or wherever you're living, then it's a break even, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
you,
Or a net
yeah, a
positive.
net positive.
Yeah,
So
because you're building value in that. Yeah, so if you're renting now, and again, nothing against renting at all. That's not what we're saying. But if you're renting now, you are paying somebody else's mortgage, or you are cash flowing that person if they already own the property outright. You're cash flowing them so they can do what they want to do. And so I'm not nothing against renting, but if
yeah,
you have that money available, like it may make sense to buy something, right? And either live in it or rent it out. Like if you buy a property and you rent that property out, and then that rent that somebody else is paying for where you want to live, you're still building an asset,
hmm
and basically doing the same thing, right? And so to me, that's really where it comes in. That's that generational wealth we talk about. It's building up these things that are going to build the value. And Jake, you gave me a little synopsis. Your real
yeah.
estate guide when you were 20 said, "Hey, if you'll do this, then at 35 you'll be
Yeah.
here." So, like, tell
Yeah.
that story again.
And I didn't do this. Looking back, I kind of wish I had. But
Yeah, hindsight's
he
2020.
he said, "Hey, look, like if you don't take anything else from this class, just do this, and you'll do very well." He said, "Take your tax return. You're going to work your job anyway here, and you're probably not going to make enough. You're going to get money back because you're a student. Take your tax return. Go put it down on a dog. Go buy something that's a dump house, right? And you're going to live there for 2 years, and you're going to fix it up, and you're going to make it nice. And over that time period, it's going to go up in value, likely, especially if it was below market value and you put work into it. And then you're going to take the money that you saved during that period in your tax returns and go do that again after 2 years. And you're going to rent that house out. And you're going to do that for 10 years. You got to live in each one 2 years while you're fixing them up and making them look nice. And then you're going to rent them out each time. And by time you're 30, you'll have 5 properties, you know, and they'll all be cash flowing and they'll all be paying the mortgages off. And you'll be able to take the cash flow off of those and go live somewhere else while those continue to pay off. And after when you're 35, that first one, if you had a 15-year mortgage when you were 20, is going to get paid off. and then you've got $5,000, or whatever the rent's going to be on that property. It's probably not going to be that much. Maybe it's $2,000 or $3,000 a month. But after all five are paid off, by time you are 40 or 45, that's $15,000 a month if they're $3,000 a piece at that point. He's like, rents aren't going down; they're only going to go up over time. So you're 45, you've got 15 grand a month coming in cash flow off these properties. If whatever you were doing for work, maybe you're making more than that, maybe you're not, but either way, that's a good cushion for yourself. And you could potentially retire at 45 if you use this model. And I was like, man, like that's really smart. Again, I didn't do it, but yeah, I think that real estate is a fantastic way to build wealth. What we got into a little bit before this discussion was 1031s, and a lot of people don't know that they can sell a property without paying tax on it and roll that into another property. So you want to get into that?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So 1031. So I'm going to use the story you just said kind of to explain this. And so we're going to talk real life action steps for somebody if they were going to, which neither one of us followed that rule. I was told something similar. I also did not do that. But but if you are 20 and you are smart enough, and definitely smarter than me, because I did not listen to the people older than me when I was 20. But if you are 20 and you are way smarter than me, and I won't throw Jake in there, but definitely smarter than me, take advantage of this. I wish I had done it at 20. But if you follow this process, so if you're not familiar with a 1031 exchange, it says you can take a property and you can roll in the gain on that property or the sale of that property into another property, right? And so one of the question I get the most on this, and this is just just shuts it down immediately, as they say, hey, I'm going to sell this property and buy this other property. How does the 1031 exchange work? And so my first question is it your personal residence? Yes, it's my personal residence. Then the conversation just stopped. This does not work for your personal residence. This is an investment. So, but as Jake and I love to give you, we're going to give you the workaround right here, right? So that 1031 exchange, it does work on a personal, but you have to convert that personal property to an investment property, right? And so here's how you do that in the scenario he just gave. So you buy the property, you live in it for 2 years. So, and most people, well, I would say most people, maybe most people don't. There's a certain amount that is excluded. It's $250,000 if you're single, $500,000 if you're married. On the sale of that property that you get, you have to have lived in it for 2 of the last 5 years when you do that. Okay. So, and you can kind of mix these and see which one works the best for you. But if you sell that property, you get that exclusion, you can move into another one. That may be the best option if it's a personal residence. If you're wanting to take advantage of the 1031, you live in it for 2 years, you fix it up, you rent it, right? Well, when you start to rent that property, now it's an investment property, okay? And you can move on to the next one. So it has to be rented for those 2 years, right? Once it's been rented for the 2 years, and this is safe harbor rule as well, but once it's been rented for 2 years, that's a true investment property. So now 1031 does kick in. And if you wanted to do what you want to do on the next home, the personal residence, you can take the exclusion as well as a 1031 on the first property, because the 1031 applies to the investment property. The 250, 500,000 exclusion is your personal residence. So again, same scenario. So the first property you purchase.
So I just want to make this clear. So I bought the first property.
Yeah.
I lived in it for 2 years. I fixed it up and I've got it rented out now. And then I get the second house. And now I've done the same thing with that one. I've lived in it for 2 years and I've fixed it up. So now I have one rent house that I've been renting for 2 years that I've owned for 4. And I've got another home that I've lived in for 2 years that I've fixed up.
Yes. Okay. And so let's say you want to sell both of those properties. Okay. And we'll sell house 1, lived in for 2 years, rented for 2 years, right? Now it's an investment property. So we're going to do 1031 exchange, which allows us to take the sale of that property and roll it into another property, right? And as long as it's an investment, it just has to meet the same use. And it's investment, you're going to buy another investment property. So you can't buy a personal residence in this. There's some ways around that too, but you can't buy another personal residence in that, because that 1031 exchange only qualifies when it's same purpose. So the investment property, the first one that's been rented for 2 years, you sell it, you buy another investment property, right? Or properties, can be a quadplex, something like
And
that, whatever.
and you could use that as the down payment, right? So this
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
the compounding piece. So let's say that first property you got into it, it was a dog, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you sold it for 250,000. You got a quarter mil after, the 2 years. It was in a good area and you fixed it up really well and all that stuff. So you can take that quarter mil and you could put that in on a triplex or a quadplex or something else that's worth $1 million, right?
Yeah. And finance the balance.
Okay.
Yeah. So you've essentially sold that, you've paid no taxes on it, 1031 exchange. You've used that to buy this other property that's higher value, right? And you do a loan against that, but you're renting it. So it's covering your mortgage on that. But you've rolled that money in, you've deferred that capital gain to the next one. All right. So you've done that, you're clean, you're good to go there. Second property we've lived in for 2 years, right? So same the scenario we just talked about. We're taking care of house one. House two that we bought, it's a dog. We lived in it for 2 years. We say, hey, we don't want to rent this one. We're just going to sell it, right? So now we're going to take our personal exclusion, the 250 to 500,000 if we're married, and we'll say we're single, so it's 250. Same scenario, $50,000 home. We sell it for 250, whatever. Like so, the gain on that, which would be 200. We're assuming you don't put a bunch of money into fixing it up, but same scenario.
Well, you probably did.
50K.
Maybe you put another 50,000 over the 2 years to get it in looking good.
Yeah. So realistically, so if you got 100K in that thing and you're single, you can sell it for 350, and that 250 gain is tax free, right? Because your personal exclusion. So you can take advantage of both of those rules to start to build that. So you can take that exclusion, build your personal, while you're using the 1031 to build your investment. So
Nice.
the best play, and I agree with your professor when he said this, the best play is to do exactly that. Live in it 2 years, rent it for 2 years, right? And then, rent it out as long as you want. But if it stops making sense, use the 1031 exchange to buy a different property, right? And you can do this multiple times. And so each property, as you live in it 2 years, then you rent it out, right? And so all of these become investment properties after that 2 years of renting, right? And then it can just move forward from that. And you can have these properties and they're cash flowing. But if it's time to move on, you do 1031 exchange, buy the next one, right? So you can take individual, you're not going to buy a quadplex or a multiplex for 50K. I get that, and that's, you probably get the same thing. Guys, I can't get into real estate. I can't afford, a couple 100,000. I can't afford $1 million property. Well, you don't need $1 million property to get into real estate investing. You can literally buy a dog, like you said, and they still exist. So before people start blowing us up saying there's no such thing as a $50,000 home where I live, well, like if you live in a nice neighborhood, you're not going to find a $50,000 home. Like the whole point of it is dog. Like these are not nice property.
No, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. Okay, like the system is not easy, or otherwise everybody would be doing it. Just like any way to make wealth. Like if it was easy, everybody would be rich. So and there's some sacrifice that comes with it. But again, like nobody. When I was 20, I didn't want to do this. I'm like, I'm going to live in the dog for 2 years and I'm not handy either. So just full disclosure. If I was handier, I could probably handle this. But yeah, well, here's another scenario, right? So say you had the 250,000 from the first home and you got 250,000 from the second home. You could use both of those and roll that money together to put a down payment on. So you got 650,000, or maybe even it's a $500,000, and you find a dog tertiary market. Yeah, like a multifamily that's in a tertiary market that needs some fixing up, right? And you could use that as the down payment there. Maybe it's got 25 to 45 units. You could probably get that for 20 or for $2 million, right? And you got 25% to put down. And most of those are going to cash flow, so pay the rents off. If it's got over 32 units, it probably has a property management team in place already. And maybe you live in one of the apartments, right? Like, you do that for however long, until that note's paid off, or you can take more leverage against that and buy a home with it.
You're not even talking a big payment, right? So Let's talk about the dog, right? Let's go with that 50K that you need to start with. Like I just looked it up on Mortgage Calculator Plus, no affiliation whatsoever, but just the first thing that popped up on Google. Yeah, so it's an investment property, so we got to do the 20% down. So at a $50,000, it's 10K down, right? And if it's personal, then there's other things, but we're going to keep it real clean on this. We're going to say, hey, we're buying it for investment. This is what it is. So 50K, you put 10K down, right? So, and I'm a big fan of the 15-year note, not the 30. I like the 15-year. Right. So current mortgage rates right now, they're showing 5.04%, right? So it's at 5. So let's just call it, we'll go 5.25. Let's go, or yeah, 5.25 just to be clean. So on that, 10K down, 15-year note, right at the current interest rate, 5.25%, $322. Like, come on, guys. I mean, it's such a small, you can't rent something for $322. It's just not going to happen, right?
Living here is not going to be nice. No. It may not have central heat and air. This house that I'm in right now is a prime example of what you exactly just said. Like when my wife bought this house, it was in foreclosure. She got the loan on the land. It was 4 acres here, and it was $30,000. Nice. The floor was caved in. There were crack pipes in the fireplace over here. Like it was rough. Okay. But you put about 50K into it. I think we could sell it for around 200,000 or 210,000 today. It's in a decent neighborhood. It just needed updated. Right. Yeah. And so those are the type of opportunities that we're talking about when we're looking for the dog. We're looking for something that's in a decent area, probably a good school district, but the property's been let go. Maybe it's been in foreclosure for a long time. Maybe it's been vacant for a long time, growed up, looks like shit, and just needs some TLC. And maybe you can't even finance the property. Like this one wouldn't pass inspection or it wasn't up to code and all that stuff, but we got the loan on the land. Right.
Yep.
So stuff like that.
You gotta be inventive. Yeah. You know, like look at options. And I love that. Right, Jake. So, and I think you just glaze right over it, but I want to come back to it. Like you have to do your research 100%. I mean, that's what he just laid out. He laid out your research. Right. And then when a lot of people would have said, oh, well, we can't get a loan on the property or on the house. So it's just a no, move on to the next. Jake said, hey, well, let's find an alternative. And so you looked in it. Can I get a loan on the land? And land does not have a high valuation, right? So let's be very clear on that. Land does not have a high valuation.
And this home was actually bringing down the value of the land.
Yeah.
Right. So, my wife and just to be transparent, my wife bought this house before I was with her, and that like exactly what we're talking about was her plan. Like she was trying to fix this up, sell it, take that, put equity in something else, and be in a better spot.
So which what I want our listeners to hear is that Jake has a sugar mama. Just so everybody.
I do not have a sugar mama. She is older than me. She's a cougar. Which I like the older ladies. They tend to know at least what they don't want.
Yeah, exactly. Mine is too. Mine's 2 years older than me. Yeah, so I'm there. I'm there as well. And she's not a sugar mama. That was just a joke, everybody. But she's one of the sweetest people on the planet. Like if you met her, you would love her instantly. I'm just joking. She's great people. But yeah, no, but it does. You got to come up with alternatives. You got to look at different things, right? If it was easy, that everybody would be doing it. So like, do a little work, look into it, find ways around it. If you hit a roadblock, find an alternative, right? There's no reason to give up on something. If it seems good, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is not. But if it's a little difficult, don't let a little difficulty stop you from chasing those dreams and finding ways to increase your wealth, right? It's not going to be easy, but if you're listening to this, you're at least smart enough to realize that like there's alternatives and you're researching those alternatives and you're learning from people that have, I don't even say that we're smarter than you, but maybe we've been there, done that, right? And so you're listening to people that have seen a lot of stuff and take that. And if you're smart enough to realize you don't know what you don't know, then you're already a big step ahead of the majority of people.
Yeah. So I want to touch on one more thing, and then we'll get into how digital assets is going to make real estate a lot more liquid than what it currently is. Yeah. But I took real estate investments in college. That same real estate professor taught that class, and he had us put together a pro forma that we could present to investors. Okay. And so if you don't have the money, that's not an excuse. Most of the time you can find a deal. If you can find the deal and you can just present it to somebody that has money and is looking for an opportunity, I've been blown away by the amount of funny people that I've run into that have money laying around that they don't know what to do with, which seemed like a crazy problem to have. They're very blessed. These are cool people. But at the same time, like, they're looking for places to put their money. And if you can show them a good deal, then they'll go in on it with you, and you give them 60% and you take 30, right? Or you give them 2/3 and you take a third. And that's where you, like, so say you had a multifamily property, or you had something that's a couple $1,000,000, maybe it's a commercial property. If you can get good at finding those deals and put a performer together and show how it's really going to cash flow and make a ton of money, then you could present that to somebody that has the funds to do it, and then get a third of that deal when y'all sell it in a couple years. And then you do have the money, and you've also been on the loan with them. So that's another big piece of this. If you've never had a loan that's that size before, the bank's not going to loan you that much on a property. They want to see a track record. And so most of the time when you're doing bigger deals, you're probably going to have a co-signer, and you probably need somebody that's been in the game a little longer than you or has done this before. So network. And that's another good way to get into real estate, is finding a deal, finding investors, marrying the two, and doing your first deal that way. And then you're going to have the credibility and some cash flow.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that. And I've been through that. Like, I've had businesses that needed funding and had to bring in people to make that happen. I am extremely blessed at an older age to be on the other side of that now. And I've been brought into deals, taking a 20% piece, because you have to be significant partner in whatever that entity is, and that threshold is 20%. So 19.9 and down, you're not. 20% more, you are. And so I've been brought into deals at a 20% or higher rate because of my credit, my business credit, which comes from the trust and our holding company. But that credit is good enough. And exactly what you said, we've done the big deals to the point where it's very easy for me to go into a bank. I can go into the exact same bank that turned me down in my 20s. And now I go in and they just want to give me money, right? Yeah. And so, but that comes with that progression. You get to a certain point and they know, okay, he's done it before, right? And people want to see that, right? Yeah. I mean, that's everything. It's understandable. That's even a relationship. Yeah. If you're currently dating and you or you get interested in another party, and that person, you tell them, I've never been in a relationship ever in my life. I don't know how to date. Like, that's going to be a little iffy, right? But if they know that you've been in relationships, you've dealt with this, then you have some experience in that, and you're a much better bet. Same situation, right? So, if you've done this, you've done these massive deals, and maybe not even massive, maybe your massive is somebody else's like nothing deal, right? But if you haven't done it, find somebody that has, and link in with them, right? And maybe it's not even like a dollar amount. Maybe it's a mentor. Like, find somebody that that's really good in that space, and just say, hey man, like, can I get a few minutes with you? Can I follow you around? Like, can I be a part of? Can I do some work for you?
Yeah, can I be your assistant? You need to provide them some value, and I don't think we've ever touched on that on this show, but we'll get into that for a second here. You always want to have some value that you're providing somebody else, especially before you ask them for something. Yes. Always be a giver. Don't be an asker. People get asked all the time about all kinds of stuff, especially if they are somebody that's prominent in their industry. So make sure you have some value to bring to the table, and give that first before ever asking anything. But yeah, that would be the way to do it, and get in with somebody that is knowledgeable about whatever you want to get into. And once you have the relationship, then, maybe ask that question, or like you, I pick up nuggets from you all the time. Let's get into how digital assets is going to affect real estate and make that market much more liquid.
Yeah, no, I love this. And so when we're talking about digitizing, we're saying, when you digitize real property, it's still based on real property, right? But now we are going to take that out of the file cabinet, so to speak, right? And we're going to put it into a digital space. And so we're no longer limited by pieces or percentage or whatever you want to call it, right? Because we're digitized. We're not running into the issue of like all the partners need to agree and like we all got to come together on this and like okay, it's going to cost us $20,000 to replace this roof and like I'm a 20% partner, so I got my $5,000. Like you guys have the rest. Like we're not dealing with all that stuff, right? So when we digitize it, there is basically you're buying whatever small piece, big piece, multiple pieces, however it needs to play out for that. And because it's digitized, all of those decisions are somewhat automated, right? We have a process for that. And so we're allowed to take as many positions. Somebody's talking to me.
That was your phone.
Yeah. Oh, it probably is. So we take all these assets and we can make that into as many pieces as we want, small, big, doesn't matter.
Fractionalize the real estate. Yeah. So
fractionalize the real estate.
If you've got an NFT, non-fungible token that's issued against a property. So Proppy is the current prominent chain that does this. If you want to look them up, they'll issue an NFT against a property, and you can fractionalize that NFT to as many pieces as you want, all the way, say, to 1,000 different pieces. And what in the past has been so cumbersome is, so like if you were part of a syndication on a multifamily property, when you get more than like 20 or 30 people that have invested in this, it's a nightmare for the accounting on all of it. You got to remember who owns how much, what the distributions are, all that stuff. With the NFT and smart contracts, all of that is automated, and it makes it all easy to account for. So the distributions for the payments for the property, the cash flows go right to the wallet addresses of the people that hold whatever percentage, and they get allocated whatever percentage. And then you also you could scale in a syndication. You can have up to 100 parties that own a piece of something, and that regulation may even change because of this technology in the future. I'm hopeful that it does. But imagine you own one apartment in a 1,000 unit complex, and you get cash flow off that one unit every month. That's how I see things playing out with this, the fractionalization of real estate like you're talking about, and how much more liquid it becomes with Proppy. So we talked about the 1031 exchange and how that works and the stipulations behind it. All of those things will still apply. However, there's one of the things we glossed over and didn't talk about was you cannot take possession of the funds when you sell the property inside of a 1031 exchange. It has to be held by a broker so that you can swap it for the other property. And that has to be done. You have to designate what property that's going to be within 45 days. You get 3 different options on that, or you can claim 3 different options. And those can be broad things. It doesn't necessarily have to be this property. It could be this property in this area, and you can find it later.
Well, within 180 days.
Right. Yeah. So the other stipulation for a 1031 exchange is the property is sold, and the money's transferred to the broker within a 45-day period, and then the other property is bought within 180 days of the sale of the first property. So
you can reverse it. You can buy it before. So you can buy the property before you actually sell the other property, and then backdate it. So it works that way as well. So if you have a property, you're like, hey, I want to get this property, but I'm going to sell this property to do it. And the banks will work with you on this too. So, this, you can do this within the bank. But if you have a property, you're like, hey, I'm going to sell this property. This is the property I want to purchase. You can purchase the second property and then sell the first one. Yeah. And still use the 1031 exchange. The big thing is you cannot take possession of the money. Again, investment can't be a primary residence. But yes, no, I just want to throw that in there. Some people
so Proppy's blockchain is the broker in this situation, right? So you sell the NFT, the money's on the blockchain inside the contract and is not distributed to you, so you never take possession of the funds. And it could expedite this process, make it much faster, especially if all the titles of the properties that you were trying to buy had already been logged on the blockchain. So you could go from, closing on a home taking 30 to 60 days or 90 days. Sometimes it could be a couple days that you could be sell this property and get into the next one within a couple of days, which is crazy. That just makes the marketplace so much more liquid. And that's I think the biggest benefit of the tokenization of real estate and the digitizing of property.
Oh yeah, big time. In the ease of making decisions, like you talked about, like the nightmare of 100 people trying to make a decision and like get the proper paperwork out and reconciling everybody's distributions and like their investment, the financial forms. Like the beauty of the digitized is it is truly is fairly, pretty much automated. I mean, if it's set up correctly, it's automated, right? And it's done. And so you may have a login that's there. You can designate within the same property, the same group. You can designate how you want to do it. So maybe you want cash flow, but maybe somebody else within it wants to increase their equity position, right? So their money doesn't come to them as distributions. It's held, and then they buy more and more pieces of that, right? So they increase their holdings. Maybe that group, we've done well, it holds assets or whatever, and we want to expand that out. We want to get into something else, that gives us the ability to do that. I mean, like it takes all of the, I want to say all, it takes a majority of the issues with the syndications and this, outside of the digitization, the antiquated way of doing it, and it solves a multitude of those issues, and makes it a wider range of people that can get involved, right? So
that's a huge piece. Again, a lot of people's apprehension to getting into real estate is the cost. It's cost prohibitive on the front end, which we talked about ways to get around that in the current traditional system. But once things are tokenized, again, say you had $1 billion property and it's got 1,000 units. I guess they would probably be, I don't know if that's 100,000 a piece or what they are. But let's say it's a smaller property. Let's say it's a $10 million property, and they could tokenize it down to 1,000 pieces. Well, then you're looking at $10,000 to get in on that property. Whereas right now, it's to get in on a $10 million property, the minimum I would expect would be 100 to $500,000 for a syndication. So it's just going to make it's going to democratize access to a lot of these private investments that people just haven't been able to get into.
Yeah. And again, we did talk about some ways to get in it without having that money down. And that's great. That's good stuff. But the reality is not everybody is going to be able to do any of those things, right? And or be willing to do it. There's going to be people that they're not going to be willing to go through those steps to make that happen. So this gives you that ability. Like if you haven't lived under a rock for the last 10 years, like now you can download just about anything. I mean, you can do it on like Cash App and Venmo and stuff now, but you can go pretty much anywhere and you can buy a tiny piece of a crypto. So you can literally invest like, $1 or something crazy. I don't know what the limits are, but, or the minimums, so this takes that concept and puts it into real estate, and allows people to really kind of invest at whatever level that they are, right? It's not, like the scenario, the $10 million property that, that has a, I don't know, $100,000 monthly payment, like not to count the million or 2 million you'd have to put down to buy it, right?
Right.
So having that, and then like that's out of reach for a lot of people. I mean, even our scenario with the 50,000, the 10 grand down for an investment property, it's out of a lot of people's reach, right? And so this gives you ability to start building those real estate holdings. And I don't want to say it eliminates the excuse, but that's kind of what we're getting at, right? There's no reason when it's digitized and it works, there's really no reason to say I can't get into real estate. Well, like, do you have a couple of bucks on every paycheck? Like, that's the way to go. Like
Acorns, right? Like you talked about that in a link to video that we had done previous. They take a little bit off of every transaction and just stick it over in this other account. I'm sure there'll probably be something like that, or Acorns themselves will get into the tokenization of real estate and have offerings on there for people to participate in those things.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it gives you an ability to do a lot of things. Like we talked about the 1031 exchange. 1031 exchange is not completely limited to properties, right? There's some other things that can play in there. And so that's what this will do, is it will give people the option to do a multitude of things. So maybe it'll be like we can invest some in residential, some in multifam, and some in like commercial. But I think outside of that, I think it will increase, and you'll be able to invest in pretty much anything that you want within that, right? And that digitizing that is going to give you these options, and you can do that. I mean, I feel like there's probably going to be, like a risk formula as well. So you come in and you say, hey, I'm like, this is extra money for me, and I don't need it immediate. So here's my time frame. I don't need this money back for the next 5 years, and I'm okay with a significant amount of risk. And so you do your little sliders, comes back and it says, hey man, you should invest this, and this to have a balanced portfolio. And I think real estate always needs to be in that. But maybe that, they come back and they say, hey, you should invest in this thing, this thing, this thing. This is super high risk. This is medium risk. This is low risk, right? And so there's always going to be kind of that return on investment, or hopefully, a reasonable return on investment. Because if you hit that roulette wheel, like Jake used in a previous podcast, it's super risky, right?
Yeah.
But I tell you how you can win in roulette every single time, is put a small bet on every single position, right? Guaranteed to lose money, but you're always going to have a return, right? So like, if you can fill in these gaps, and you can invest in multiple scenarios, multiple pieces of investment, you're going to have a much better chance of a return. So, with that being said, don't put all your money into one basket. Don't put it all on one investment. Invest in multiple things. Find the things that you like. Find the things that you understand, that you enjoy the research in, and you'll more than likely come out.
Yeah, I agree. Well, cool. I really enjoyed that one. We'll have to do another one that goes over some other types of real estate and different investments, but that was a broad view and kind of what digital assets is going to do to those. And it's going to be all the time we have for this one. But as always, I appreciate you, Byron. And we'll see you guys on the next one.
All right. Thanks, man.